The wind howled across the empty desert, carrying sand that stung like tiny needles. Dr. Maya Rodriguez pulled her jacket tighter as she walked toward the massive radio telescope that had become her whole world. 3 years ago, this place buzzed with activity. Scientists came and went, government officials visited monthly, and the research station hummed with the sound of progress. Now it felt like a ghost town. Maya had been 28 when she first arrived at the Atacama Desert Observatory, fresh out of graduate school and full of dreams about discovering life beyond Earth. Back then, the SETI program had funding, respect, and most importantly, hope. The government believed in their mission to search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The public was fascinated by the possibility of alien contact. Everything seemed possible, but 3 years changes everything. Budget cuts came first, swift and brutal. Then the ridicule started. Other scientists began calling their work a waste of time and money. News articles painted them as dreamers chasing fantasies while real problems needed solving on Earth. One by one, her colleagues left for more stable jobs at universities or private companies. The maintenance crews stopped coming. The supply deliveries became irregular, then stopped altogether. Now, Maya shared the vast facility with only 2 other people. Tommy Chen, a graduate student who stayed because he genuinely believed in the work, and old Bill Harrison, a radio technician who had been there since the observatory opened 15 years ago. Bill claimed he stayed because he was too stubborn to quit, but Maya knew the truth. Like her, he couldn't bear to abandon the dream of making contact with something greater than themselves. The isolation was crushing. Their nearest neighbor lived 200 miles away in a tiny desert town that barely deserved to be called a settlement. When equipment broke down, they fixed it themselves or went without. When they needed supplies, they drove 6 hours to the nearest city and hoped their old pickup truck would make the journey. The communication equipment had been failing for weeks, leaving them more cut off from the world than astronauts in space. Maya climbed the metal stairs to the control room, her footsteps echoing in the empty building. The room that once bustled with activity now felt cavernous. Dozens of computer monitors lined the walls, most of them dark to save power. The few that remained active cast an eerie blue glow across rows of empty desks. She could remember when every seat was filled, when the air buzzed with excited conversations about potential signals and breakthrough discoveries. Tommy was already at his station, headphones on, staring intently at a screen full of data. At 24, he had the kind of optimism that Maya envied. Despite everything that had happened, despite watching their program crumble around them, he still believed they would find something. His enthusiasm reminded Maya why she had fallen in love with this work in the first place. Bill sat at the radio control panel, making adjustments with the practiced ease of someone who had done this job for decades. He was 62 years old, with calloused hands and a weathered face that told the story of a man who had spent his life working with his hands. Before coming to the observatory, he had worked on radio towers across the country. He understood the equipment better than anyone, which was fortunate since they could no longer afford professional maintenance. The evening routine was always the same. Maya would review the day's data, looking for anything unusual among the cosmic background noise. Tommy would prepare the equipment for the night's observations, setting up the computers to record and analyze every signal the telescope received. Bill would fine-tune the radio arrays, making sure they were pointed at the right coordinates in space. It was tedious work, made harder by the constant knowledge that the outside world had given up on them. Maya often wondered if they were fooling themselves, if they were just 3 people playing pretend in the middle of nowhere. The universe was vast and mostly empty. The chances of detecting an alien signal were astronomically small. Maybe the critics were right. Maybe they were wasting their time, but then she would remember why she started this work. As a child, Maya had spent countless nights staring up at the stars, wondering if someone else was looking back. The possibility that Earth might not be alone in the universe filled her with wonder. Even now, surrounded by broken dreams and abandoned equipment, that wonder remained. The funding cuts had been brutal but predictable. First, they lost the money for new equipment. Then the salaries were reduced. The support staff was let go. Finally, even basic maintenance was canceled. Maya, Tommy, and Bill now worked essentially for free, surviving on their savings and the occasional small grant from private organizations that still believed in SETI research, the public relations. Disaster had been worse than the money problems. A series of false alarms in their early years had made them look foolish. Every time they detected what seemed like an artificial signal, it turned out to be interference from a satellite, a glitch in their equipment, or just an unusual natural phenomenon. The media loved to mock their failures. Late-night talk show hosts made jokes about the crazy scientists in the desert talking to aliens. The ridicule hurt more than Maya cared to admit. Their isolation wasn't just physical anymore. The scientific community had largely written them off. Former colleagues stopped returning their calls. Conference invitations dried up. Papers they submitted to journals were rejected without serious review. They had become pariahs in their own field, the embarrassing relatives that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Maya walked over to the large window that faced west, where the sun was setting behind distant mountains. The view was spectacular, with colors that painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the silence of the desert, she could almost forget about the outside world and its problems. Almost. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had set out to make contact with alien civilizations, but they had ended up more isolated than ever from their own species. Their quest to find life beyond Earth had cost them their connections to life on Earth. Friends had drifted away, tired of hearing about work that seemed to lead nowhere. Family members had stopped asking about their research, embarrassed by association with what many saw as pseudoscience, yet Maya couldn't bring herself to leave. Despite everything, despite the failures and the mockery and the loneliness, she still felt called to this work. Every night when she turned on the equipment and pointed it toward the stars, she felt a spark of the old excitement. Tonight might be the night. Tonight, they might finally hear something that would change everything. As darkness fell across the desert, Maya began her nightly ritual of checking the equipment and preparing for another long night of listening to the cosmos. She had no way of knowing that this particular night would indeed change everything, just not in the way she had always hoped. The universe was about to answer their call, but the response would be far more terrifying than anything she had ever imagined. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Maya kept sipping it anyway. It was almost midnight, and the desert outside was completely silent except for the gentle hum of their equipment. Tommy was hunched over his computer screen, adjusting the sensitivity settings for what felt like the 100th time that evening. Bill had dozed off in his chair, his chin resting on his chest, soft snores mixing with the electronic sounds of their instruments. This was how most nights went. Hours of careful monitoring, watching waves of cosmic radiation flow across their screens like an endless ocean of static. Maya had learned to read the patterns over the years. She knew the difference between a pulsar's regular beat and the chaotic noise from a distant galaxy. She could spot interference from passing satellites, or the electrical storms that sometimes erupted on Jupiter. After 3 years of this routine, she thought she had seen everything the universe could throw at them. She was wrong. At exactly 11:47 p.m., something changed. Maya noticed it first as a tiny blip on her primary monitor, just a small variation in the background noise they had been recording. For a moment she thought it might be another false alarm. They had experienced dozens of them over the years. Equipment glitches, atmospheric interference, even signals from Earth-based sources that somehow bounced back to them from space. But this was different. The signal wasn't random or chaotic like natural cosmic phenomena. It had structure, pattern, purpose. Maya felt her heart start to beat faster as she stared at the data streaming across her screen. The signal was coming from somewhere beyond Jupiter's orbit, moving in their direction at a speed that should have been impossible. "Tommy," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady, "come look at this." The young graduate student looked up from his work, rubbing his tired eyes. "Another satellite?" he asked, not bothering to hide his exhaustion. They had been tracking routine signals all week, and his enthusiasm was wearing thin. "I don't think so," Maya replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to isolate and analyze the mysterious transmission. "This is coming from deep space, and it's definitely artificial." Tommy practically leaped from his chair, suddenly wide awake. He rushed over to Maya's station and peered at her screen, his eyes growing wide as he processed what he was seeing. The signal was unlike anything in their databases. It pulsed with mathematical precision, following patterns that suggested intelligence behind its creation. "Holy cow," Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is this real?" Maya was already running verification protocols, double-checking their equipment to make sure they weren't looking at some kind of malfunction. Every test came back clean. The signal was genuine, artificial, and definitely extraterrestrial. After 3 years of searching, after all the ridicule and abandonment, they had finally found what they were looking for. "Bill," Maya called out, louder this time. "Wake up, you need to see this." The old technician stirred in his chair, blinking sleepily as he tried to focus on what was happening around him. When he saw Maya and Tommy huddled around the computer screen, their faces lit up with excitement. He knew something important was happening. Bill had been in this business long enough to recognize the look of a real discovery. He walked over. Slowly, his joints creaking after sitting in the uncomfortable chair for hours. When he saw the data on Maya's screen, his expression changed completely. 40 years of experience in radio astronomy had taught him to spot the difference between genuine signals and false alarms. This was definitely the real thing. "Where's it coming from?" Bill asked, his voice hoarse from sleep. Maya pointed to the star chart displayed on another monitor. "Out there past Jupiter. But here's the scary part. It's moving toward us. And it's moving fast. Way faster than anything we know about." The three of them spent the next hour running every test they could think of. They checked their equipment for malfunctions, searched their databases for similar signals, and even tried to contact other observatories to verify their findings. But their communication systems, which had been failing for weeks, chose that moment to die completely. The internet connection went dead, their satellite phones stopped working, and even their old radio transmitter fell silent. They were completely cut off from the outside world, sitting on the most important discovery in human history with no way to tell anyone about it. "This can't be a coincidence," Tommy said, pacing back and forth across the control room. "Our communications fail right when we detect an alien signal. That's too weird to be random." Maya was thinking the same thing, but she didn't want to voice her suspicions. The signal they were tracking was growing stronger by the hour, which meant whatever was transmitting it was getting closer to Earth, a lot closer. Her calculations suggested that the source would reach Earth's atmosphere within days, not months or years. Bill was frantically trying to repair their communication equipment, but nothing worked. It was as if some invisible force had reached out and severed all their connections to the outside world. They had emergency protocols for situations like this, backup systems and alternate communication methods, but everything had failed at once. "We need to get word out somehow," Maya said, trying to stay calm despite the growing sense of urgency. "If something is heading toward Earth, people need to know about it." But how could they warn anyone? Their nearest neighbor was 200 miles away across empty desert. Their vehicle was low on fuel, and the journey would take hours. By the time they reached civilization and convinced someone to listen to their story, it might be too late. The night wore on, the signal continued to grow stronger. Maya tracked its progress across the solar system, watching in fascination and growing fear as the source moved past Mars and entered the inner solar system. Whatever was out there, it was headed directly for Earth, and it would arrive much sooner than anyone could possibly prepare for. The mathematical patterns in the signal were becoming clearer as it approached. Maya began to recognize sequences that looked almost like communication protocols, as if the source was trying to establish contact with something or someone on Earth, but there was something cold and calculating about the patterns, something that made her increasingly uncomfortable. What if they're not friendly? Tommy asked quietly, voicing the fear that all three of them were feeling but hadn't dared to express. Maya didn't have an answer. For years, she had dreamed of making contact with alien intelligence, imagining peaceful encounters and the sharing of knowledge between civilizations. She had never seriously considered the possibility that first contact might be hostile. As dawn approached, casting long shadows across the desert, the three isolated scientists continued their vigil. They had discovered something that would change human history forever, but they were powerless to warn anyone. All they could do was watch and wait as something alien and unknown approached their world, carrying intentions that remained terrifyingly unclear. Maya hadn't slept in 3 days. None of them had. They took turns watching the monitors, tracking the mysterious signal as it drew closer to Earth. Tommy survived on energy drinks and determination, while Bill kept himself going with strong coffee and nervous energy. The waiting was driving them all crazy, but they couldn't look away. History was about to be made, and they were the only witnesses. On the third day, it happened. Maya was adjusting the telescope's position when she noticed something wrong with the morning sky. There was a shadow where no shadow should be, a dark shape hanging motionless above the horizon. At first, she thought it might be a cloud, but clouds don't stay perfectly still in windy desert air. The shape was geometric, artificial, and impossibly huge. "Guys," she called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Come outside, now." Tommy and Bill rushed out of the control room, squinting in the bright desert sunlight. When they saw what Maya was staring at, all three of them stood frozen in shock. Hanging in the sky above them was a massive black object, shaped like nothing any human had ever built. It was sleek and angular, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The thing was easily the size of a small city, yet it made no sound and cast no shadow on the ground below. "Is that what's been sending the signal?" Tommy asked, his voice shaking. Maya nodded, unable to speak. According to their instruments, this was just one of many identical objects that had appeared simultaneously over major cities around the world. London, Tokyo, New York, Moscow, Beijing, every major population center now had one of these alien ships hovering overhead like a dark omen. They rushed back inside to monitor news broadcasts, hoping their equipment might pick up emergency transmissions. From around the globe, what they heard filled them with dread. Military bases were reporting that aircraft sent to investigate the ships had simply vanished. Not shot down, not destroyed, they had just disappeared completely, as if they had never existed at all. World leaders were trying to establish communication with the visitors, broadcasting messages of welcome and peace in dozens of languages. The alien ships remained silent, unresponsive to every attempt at contact. For hours, it seemed like the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for some sign of the newcomers' intentions. Then the lights went out. It started as a rolling blackout across Europe, spreading faster than any natural power failure could move. Within minutes, similar electromagnetic pulses were reported from every continent. Power grids collapsed, communication networks went dark, and transportation systems ground to a halt. The modern world, so dependent on electricity and digital technology, suddenly found itself thrust back into the dark ages. Maya watched their own equipment flicker and die as the pulse wave reached their remote location. Their generators kept running, but most of their sensitive electronic instruments were fried beyond repair. Only their oldest, most basic radio equipment survived the electromagnetic attack. "They're not here to talk," Bill said grimly, adjusting the dials on their ancient backup radio. "This is an invasion." Through static and interference, they managed to pick up scattered emergency broadcasts from around the world. The reports were terrifying and consistent. After shutting down Earth's technology, the alien ships had begun deploying smaller craft. These vessels, about the size of fighter jets but moving with impossible grace and speed, were systematically targeting specific locations in every major city, but they weren't attacking randomly. The pattern became clear as Maya, Tommy, and Bill listened to report after report. The alien craft were specifically hunting down universities, research laboratories, space agencies, and anywhere else that scientists and engineers might be found. Libraries were being destroyed, especially those containing technical knowledge. Observatories like their own were being systematically eliminated. They're trying to cripple our knowledge base, Maya realized with growing horror. They don't want us to be able to fight back or understand their technology. The reports from around the world painted a picture of methodical destruction. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, gone. The European Space Agency, destroyed. NASA's facilities wiped out in coordinated strikes. It wasn't random violence or conquest in the traditional sense. This was surgical removal of humanity's scientific capability. Tommy was monitoring their long-range sensors when he detected something that made his blood run cold. Maya, we've got a problem. One of those smaller ships is heading this way. Through their telescope, they could see it approaching from the direction of the nearest city. The craft moved unlike anything human engineering had ever produced, changing direction instantly without regard for physics as humans understood it. It was scanning the landscape below, clearly searching for something specific. It's looking for us, Bill said quietly. Or at least it's looking for places like this. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the truth of their situation. For 3 years, their isolation had felt like abandonment. The scientific community had forgotten about them. The government had stopped funding them, and the world had moved on without them. Now, that same isolation might be the only thing keeping them alive. The alien craft was still several miles away, but it was moving in a systematic search pattern, investigating every artificial structure in the area. Maya could see it pause over an old mining facility, then move on to check an abandoned weather station. It was being thorough, leaving nothing unexplored. We need to hide the equipment, Tommy said urgently. If they find us, they'll destroy everything we've learned about them. The 3 of them worked frantically to shut down their remaining instruments and hide any signs of their scientific activity. They covered the radio telescope with camouflage tarps left over from the observatory's military research days, hoping to disguise it as just another piece of desert debris. Through their backup radio, they continued to monitor the global situation. The news was getting worse by the hour. Major cities were reporting mass disappearances of technical personnel. Engineers, computer programmers, physicists, astronomers, anyone with advanced scientific knowledge was being systematically hunted down and captured. Those who resisted or tried to hide were simply eliminated. The pattern was becoming clear. The aliens weren't just conquering Earth, they were preparing it for something else. By removing humanity's technical knowledge and scientific capability, they were ensuring that Earth's population would be helpless against whatever came next. As the alien craft drew closer to their position, Maya made a desperate decision. She activated their emergency beacon, broadcasting on an old military frequency that might still be monitored by isolated military units around the world. Her message was simple but urgent. The aliens were specifically targeting scientific knowledge and technical expertise. Anyone with such knowledge needed to hide immediately. The approaching alien ship was now close enough that they could see it clearly through their telescope. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, with flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to shift and change as they watched. But there was something predatory about its movement, something that reminded Maya of a hunting animal stalking its prey. "It's almost here," Tommy whispered, watching the craft's approach on their last functioning sensor. "What do we do?" Maya looked at her 2 companions, these brave souls who had stuck with her through years of isolation and ridicule. They had finally found what they were looking for, but it wasn't the peaceful contact they had dreamed of. Instead, they had discovered humanity's worst nightmare, visitors from the stars who saw Earth not as a partner, but as a threat to be neutralized. The alien craft circled their observatory like a vulture, moving in slow, deliberate patterns that made Maya's skin crawl. Through their hidden telescope, she could see strange scanning beams sweeping across the desert floor, probing every structure and piece of equipment. The ship was beautiful in the way a predator is beautiful, sleek, efficient, and absolutely terrifying. "It knows we're here," Tommy whispered, crouched behind a bank of disabled computers. "Look at how it's moving. That's not random searching, it's tracking something specific." Maya felt her heart pound as she watched the craft hover directly above their main building. The alien ship was completely silent, making no sound despite its massive size. It just hung there in the bright desert sky like a dark omen, casting a shadow that seemed to absorb heat and light. Bill was working frantically at their backup communication system, trying to establish contact with anyone who might still be listening. His weathered hands moved across the old radio controls with practiced ease, but his face showed the strain of their impossible situation. "I'm picking up scattered transmissions," he said quietly. "Military units are reporting the same thing. Worldwide. These ships are specifically hunting scientists and engineers." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. After 3 years of being ignored and forgotten by the scientific community, she was finally understanding why their isolation might have saved their lives. While their colleagues at major universities and research centers were being systematically captured or eliminated, the 3 of them had been overlooked simply because nobody remembered they existed. "Listen to this," Bill said, adjusting the radio frequency. A weak signal came through the static, a desperate transmission from somewhere in Europe. The voice was speaking broken English, reporting that alien forces had surrounded the European Space Agency headquarters. Scientists were being marched out in groups and loaded onto smaller alien craft. Those who resisted were simply erased by weapons that left no trace behind. Maya shuddered as she listened to similar reports from around the globe. MIT had gone completely silent after alien craft landed on campus. The staff at NASA's Johnson Space Center had vanished without a trace. Even smaller research facilities and university laboratories were being systematically targeted and destroyed. The aliens weren't just conquering Earth. They were methodically eliminating humanity's ability to understand or fight back against advanced technology. "They're not taking prisoners," Tommy observed grimly, listening to another fragmentary transmission. "They're removing threats. Anyone who might be able to figure out their technology or organize a resistance is being eliminated." The alien ship above them suddenly changed its behavior. Instead of circling, it dropped lower and began emitting a different type of scanning beam. Maya could see the energy waves through their instruments, powerful emissions that seemed to penetrate deep into the ground and through their building's walls. "It's reading our equipment signatures," Bill said with growing alarm. "All that sensitive scientific gear we tried to hide, it's still giving off electromagnetic traces. The ship knows exactly what kind of facility this is." Maya realized they were out of time. The alien craft had identified their observatory as a scientific installation, which meant they were now marked for elimination. But something strange happened as she watched the ship's scanning pattern. Instead of immediately attacking, it seemed to be waiting for something. "Why isn't it just destroying us?" Tommy asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. The answer came from their radio. Bill had managed to intercept a transmission from a hidden military unit that was monitoring alien communications. The fragmented message revealed a chilling truth. The aliens weren't randomly eliminating scientists. They were studying human knowledge first, downloading and analyzing our scientific databases before destroying them. They wanted to understand exactly what humanity knew before wiping out that knowledge forever. "They're learning from us before they kill us," Maya said, the horrible realization making her feel sick. "They want to know what we've discovered so they can make sure no one else ever discovers it again." The alien ship began descending toward their facility, moving with the same predatory grace they had observed before. Maya could see smaller scanning devices deploying from its hull, preparing to analyze every piece of equipment in their observatory. Once the aliens had extracted all useful information, the building and everyone in it would be eliminated. Bill suddenly stood up from his radio station, his face set with grim determination. "I've got an idea," he said, moving toward the main power controls. "But you two need to get out of here right now." "What are you talking about?" Maya demanded. "We're not leaving you behind." "Listen to me," Bill said urgently, his hands already working on the electrical systems. "That ship wants to download our data before destroying us." "But what if there's no data left to download?" What if everything gets wiped out before they can access it? Maya understood immediately. Bill was planning to overload their power systems, creating an electromagnetic pulse that would destroy all their equipment and data before the aliens could analyze it. It was a desperate plan, but it might be their only chance to deny the invaders the scientific knowledge they were seeking. The blast will take out everything in a half-mile radius, Bill continued, connecting cables and adjusting power settings with practiced efficiency. You two need to get to the emergency shelter we built behind the ridge. Take the portable equipment and whatever data you can carry. Tommy was already gathering their most important research materials, stuffing hard drives and notebooks into a backpack. Maya hesitated, torn between her desire to help Bill and her responsibility to preserve their discoveries. They had learned so much about the alien technology and behavior patterns. That information might be crucial for any future resistance efforts. Go! Bill shouted as the alien ship touched down just outside their building. I'll give you as much time as I can. Maya and Tommy ran for the back exit, carrying their precious data and the few pieces of portable equipment they had managed to save. Behind them, they could hear the building's power systems beginning to overload as Bill pushed them far beyond their safety limits. The alien craft had deployed several smaller machines that were already beginning to penetrate their facility. Maya could see them through the windows, spider-like devices that moved with unnatural speed and precision, seeking out computers and data storage systems. They were running out of time. As Maya and Tommy reached the emergency shelter, built into the rocky ridge behind their observatory, Maya turned back to see Bill still working at his control station. The old technician was surrounded by sparking electrical equipment, his face illuminated by the harsh glow of overloading power systems. He looked up and saw her watching, then gave her a thumbs up and a grim smile. The explosion lit up the entire desert. Maya felt the ground shake beneath her feet as their observatory disappeared in a brilliant flash of electromagnetic energy. The alien ship was caught in the blast, its smooth hull flickering and sparking as the pulse overloaded its scanning equipment. For a moment, Maya dared to hope that their sacrifice had damaged the invaders, but the alien craft recovered quickly, its hull repairing itself with technology that seemed almost like magic. The ship lifted off from the smoking ruins of their facility and began scanning the surrounding area, looking for survivors. Maya and Tommy huddled in their rocky shelter, clutching their rescued data and wondering how long they could stay hidden. They had escaped the initial attack, but they were now alone in the desert with limited supplies and the most dangerous enemy humanity had ever faced hunting them. The real test of their survival was just beginning. The abandoned research station looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. Maya and Tommy had been walking through the desert for 2 days, following old service roads and hiding from alien patrols when they finally spotted the weathered concrete building rising from behind a cluster of rocky hills. The facility had been built in the 1960s for atmospheric research, then abandoned when funding ran out decades ago. Please tell me this place still has power, Tommy said, his voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. They had been rationing their water carefully, but the desert heat was merciless, and their supplies were running dangerously low. Maya pushed open the heavy metal door, which squeaked on rusty hinges. Inside, the building was dark and musty, filled with outdated equipment that looked like museum pieces. But when she found the main electrical panel and threw the master switch, a few lights flickered to life. The old generators were still functional, powered by a geothermal system that had been designed to run for decades without maintenance. We've got electricity, Maya said with relief. Now let's see if any of this old equipment still works. They spent the next several hours exploring the facility, taking inventory of what they had to work with. Most of the research equipment was hopelessly outdated, but Maya's trained eye spotted several pieces that might still be useful. There was an old radio transmitter that looked like it belonged in a war movie, and a bank of computers that were ancient by modern standards, but might still be capable of processing data. Tommy was examining a dusty workbench when he made an important discovery. Maya, look at this, he called out, pointing to a collection of electronic components. This is military surplus communication gear. If we can get it working, we might be able to reach people who are still out there. Maya felt a spark of hope. For the first time since their escape, they had managed to save some crucial data about the alien technology and behavior patterns. But that information was useless if they couldn't share it with anyone. The abandoned research station might give them the tools they needed to contact other survivors. Working together, they began assembling a makeshift communication system from the various pieces of equipment scattered throughout the facility. Maya's knowledge of radio astronomy proved invaluable, as she figured out how to modify the old transmitter to work with their salvaged data storage devices. Tommy's computer skills helped them cobble together a system that could process and transmit the information they had gathered. It took them 3 days of continuous work, surviving on canned food they found in the facility's emergency supplies, and water from an old well that still produced clean groundwater. The alien ships continued to patrol the area, but the research station's remote location and outdated technology seemed to make it invisible to their advanced sensors. On the 4th day, they finally established contact with the outside world. The first voice they heard through the static was speaking Spanish, a desperate transmission from somewhere in South America. Maya quickly adjusted their equipment to respond, and soon they were part of a growing network of survivors who had managed to stay hidden from the alien forces. "This is Dr. Rodriguez at the Atacama Observatory," Maya broadcast, using their old call sign. "We have crucial information about the alien technology and attack patterns. Is anyone receiving this transmission?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voices began responding from around the globe: isolated military units, hidden research teams, even individual scientists who had managed to escape the systematic elimination of their colleagues. All of them were desperate for information about their alien attackers. Maya and Tommy worked around the clock, sharing everything they had learned about the invaders. They transmitted their observations about the aliens' hunting patterns, their apparent weaknesses, and most importantly, their true purpose on Earth. The information spread through the survivor network like wildfire, reaching hidden resistance cells in dozens of countries. But it was Tommy who made the most important discovery. While analyzing their data, as he reviewed the recordings of the original alien signal, he noticed something that Maya had missed. The transmission wasn't just a communication beam. It was also terraforming instructions, a detailed blueprint for transforming Earth's atmosphere into something completely different. "Maya, you need to see this," Tommy said urgently, pointing to the data streaming across their improvised computer screen. "The aliens aren't here to conquer us. They're here to change our entire planet." Maya studied the data with growing horror. The alien plan was more comprehensive and terrifying than she had imagined. They weren't just eliminating human scientific knowledge to prevent resistance. They were preparing Earth for complete atmospheric conversion. The process would make the planet uninhabitable for human life while creating perfect conditions for their own species. "How long do we have?" Maya asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Tommy's calculations painted a grim picture. Based on the terraforming timeline embedded in the alien signal, humanity had weeks, not months, before the atmospheric changes became irreversible. The aliens had been methodical in their approach, but they were also working against a strict schedule. Maya immediately began broadcasting this new information to the survivor network. The response was electric resistance groups around the world suddenly understood that they weren't just fighting for freedom, but for the very survival of their species. The urgency of their situation galvanized scattered survivors into coordinated action. Working from their forgotten research station, Maya and Tommy became the unofficial coordinators of humanity's resistance. Their remote location and outdated equipment, which had once made them feel isolated and irrelevant, now made them the perfect command center for a global network of survivors. They discovered that the aliens had made a crucial mistake in their systematic elimination of human scientists. By focusing on major universities and research centers, they had overlooked countless smaller facilities, independent researchers, and retired experts who possessed valuable knowledge and skills. These overlooked individuals now formed the backbone of the resistance movement. Maya found herself coordinating attacks on alien terraforming installations, using her knowledge of their technology to identify vulnerable points in their operations. Tommy managed communications between resistance cells, helping isolated groups share resources and coordinate their efforts. Together, they had become something they never expected to be: military commanders in humanity's fight for survival. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. For 3 years she had felt abandoned and forgotten by the scientific community. Her research had been dismissed as worthless, her funding cut, her work ridiculed. But now that same worthless research was providing the knowledge needed to fight back against humanity's greatest threat. As reports came in from around the world, Maya began to see a pattern emerging. The alien forces were powerful and technologically advanced, but they had underestimated human adaptability and resourcefulness. By dismissing Earth's primitive technology and overlooking its forgotten corners, they had left gaps in their control that the resistance was learning to exploit. Standing in the dusty control room of the abandoned research station, surrounded by equipment that the world had forgotten, Maya felt a strange sense of destiny. She had spent years searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, never imagining that when contact finally came, it would be her job to help humanity survive it. The battle for Earth's future was just beginning. But for the first time since the alien ships had appeared, Maya felt hope. They had been abandoned, overlooked, and forgotten, but they were still here, still fighting, and still determined to save their world. Sometimes the most important people are the ones nobody expects to matter, and Maya was about to prove that point in the most dramatic way possible.